I have a sister who was a surprise baby, and my mother's second pregnancy was so difficult that she could not have any more children. My parents clung to her as if she were a miracle and treated her like a miracle. The favoritism towards her made me feel like a spare kid in the house, and they only needed me when they needed a free nanny. My sister became a spoiled brat and bossy, and I avoided her as much as possible. Before start story, please subscribe to our YouTube channel, Story Podcast Book. This year, I turned 18 and left my parents' home. I have a sister who is a decade younger than me. She was a surprise baby, and she barely survived her birth. I never learned much about how difficult my mother's second pregnancy was, but I do know that it was so damaging to her health that she could not have any more children after my sister came into the world. She spent a lot of time in the hospital that year. She almost died giving birth to my sister. That made my parents cling to my little sister as if she was a miracle. And ever since then, I felt like I was just the spare kid in the house. The only time they needed me was when they wanted a free nanny. The favoritism my parents showed for so long made me think they were crazy for not seeing how it hurt me. And now they are paying the price for it, starting from when I was 11. My parents made me share my candles with my sister because she was 2 years old and threw a tantrum when she saw a cake that was not for her. I hated it, but my parents insisted on it. They lit the candles again for me to blow them after her, but it felt like a mockery. It happened again the next year and the year after that and so on. They never stopped until it became a habit. My sister also got gifts on my birthdays. I got nothing on hers, and when I questioned why, they just said that I'm a boy, and boys don't care about that stuff. I was a kid, but did they really expect me to buy that? No way. And my parents always picked a place my sister preferred over me on my own birthday. It ended up being like my sister had 2 birthdays a year, and I had none. On top of that, my parents centered their whole lives around my sister. If I wanted to do something, my sister had to agree to it. Otherwise, it was rejected unless I could do it by myself. I learned to just stay in my room with my video games because they left me alone there, except when my sister barged in to bug me. That's why I put a lock on the door. My parents asked me to take it off, but I snapped because I was an angry teenager who was sick of being invaded at any time. My sister walked in more than once when I was naked, and my parents scolded me for being nude in my own room. When I pointed out how absurd that was, they backed off and let me keep the lock. My sister became a spoiled brat because of how she got everything she wanted every day, and she was very bossy, so I avoided her as much as I could. Whatever reason I could find to not have to interact with her, even if I had to lie just to have some peace. My parents hired a teen girl babysitter, and I got some personal time. But then the babysitter quit because my sister disobeyed her, and my parents refused to pay her by saying she did a poor job. The girl got some other people to help her, and my parents finally paid her what they owed her. Then they hired another girl to babysit regularly, and this one stayed. But my parents still told me that I had to watch my sister any day I was free, which I tried to make busy at my part-time job if I could. My sister acted like I was her servant and commanded me around. She even had a dumb nickname for me she never stopped using. Just hearing that nickname makes me furious. And if I didn't give her everything she asked for, she'd cry and call our parents, and then I'd be in trouble for mistreating her. We had many huge fights because of this, and after I stopped giving in, my relationship with my parents deteriorated into hardly any words exchanged between us for a while. And yet, during my high school graduation, they had the audacity to boast to other parents that they were the reason I worked so hard. Well, they were right. But the reason they had in mind was not the one that really happened. I worked hard just waiting for the time when I'd be free, but my parents acted like they'd done so much. Maybe they did before my sister was born, but after that it was all about her. They didn't even ask me about school until parent-teacher conferences came up. I graduated with a B and C average, and after my graduation, my parents just took me to some place where my sister would always have more fun than me, even though the trip was supposed to be for me. Things came to a head on my 18th birthday in July. It didn't feel like it was my day at all. I prayed that we would go to my favorite restaurant for once, but no, they had the party at the local imitation Chuck E. Cheese. It was the only place like that near us, so it was the default celebration spot whenever something big happened, like my high school graduation. I told you it was a place my sister liked more than me. I was surrounded by kids who were half my age having parties, and I was so bored with nothing to do but eat bland pizza and play claw machines and old arcade games for tickets to poorly made prizes that gave me no happiness. Then when it was time for cake, my parents brought out one that was pink with white flowers on it. It had my name on it, but it was clearly not a boy's cake, and there were only 10 candles. My parents lit the candles and put it right in front of my sister to blow out. That's when it finally happened. I just had this mental flash of all the hate I had bottled up, and then I just started sobbing. An 18-year-old boy, was crying in front of the whole family. Everyone was so stunned that time seemed to just stop. I got up, and all of the stuff I'd been keeping in for the past 8 years just burst out like verbal diarrhea. The whole family saw what happened, and when it was over, I just walked out to sit by the family car. Some relatives followed me to say they were sorry, and that they didn't know about the pink cake because my parents hid it until it was time. I said it didn't matter that they didn't know. They all watched as my life was taken away by Little Miss Perfect for the past 8 years. I had no real birthdays or parties of my own. They were all for her. And then, on the most important birthday of my life, they all wanted me to just grin and bear it like always while they gave my sister a cake that was clearly for her when it was not even her birthday. Some of them started apologizing, but they said that all this time they just thought I was fine with it because my parents said I was. I told them I was never fine with it, and my parents made me do it every year until I just acted like I accepted it. I opened my arms and said to look where we were. Does it look like the place I wanted to celebrate my graduation and 18th birthday? No one ever stood up for me all this time. I'm just the other kid while my sister gets everything. I didn't even get to have any of my friends there because my parents stopped letting me invite them a long time ago after they tried to say something about my sister blowing out my candles. There are 365 days a year, and was it so wrong to want one that was for me and not her? Instead, I'm treated like the selfish, spoiled brat for wanting my own birthday. Then I just started crying again. My father came out by then to yell at me for making such a big scene because my mother was crying too. My sister was mad because I ruined her moment, and now everyone in there who saw thinks they're bad parents. I yelled back at him that they are bad parents, and he should know exactly why. After I said that, the rest of the family attacked him like a pack of wolves. Better late than never, I guess. But I'd never seen anything like it before. My father was almost pushed to the restaurant front door, and then most of the crowd went back inside with him to confront my mother too. My grandparents stayed with me and said sorry for being so blind for so long. I don't know what was said to my parents in the restaurant, but it was about half an hour before they came back out, and when they did, they looked very defeated. My mother was still sniffing after crying so much, and neither of my parents could look me in the eyes. They both clumsily apologized for what they did, and then offered to redo the party somewhere else. But that was not enough for the crowd. One of my uncles, ahed, very loudly, and my parents said they'd never make me let my sister blow out my candles again, or give her gifts on my birthday, or make any part of it for her. There was another ahem, and my parents also said sorry for getting a cake that was obviously not for me, and that they just thought I didn't care about cake anymore at my age. Oh boy, was that the wrong thing to say. I got angry all over again, and shouted at them that my age didn't matter. They'd literally given my birthday to my sister, and had no good reason for it, and they knew it. Then I said there was no point in redoing the party because it's too late. They clearly showed that I mean nothing to them. They ruined 8 years of my life until I became an adult. What future birthdays with them could I possibly look forward to? Well, my father started to get mad at me for saying that. But when the whole family screamed at him, he shut up. My grandfather told him I'm right, and there is no way they can fix the damage now. He said my parents were terrible people, played favorites, and treated me like dirt. My mother collapsed again and tried to come near me while sobbing my name and saying sorry. But I pushed her away from me, and half the family stopped her from getting close. I just said I had enough and started to walk away. One of my aunts ran after me and brought me back. I could hear many family members shouting and swearing at my parents over what happened. But I was so angry. I couldn't even feel glad for any bit of justice after all this time. And what about my sister? Where was she when this was all happening? She was still in the restaurant by herself, eating cake and tearing open presents that were for me. And yes, my parents gave her some cake after I walked out crying. You'd think they would have other things to worry about at that moment, but they were confronted about it later. My grandparents made me calm down and sit in their old minivan while everyone else cleaned up the party. My sister had a huge fit after being caught opening my presents. One of them was a brand new smartphone that she smashed against the wall and broke because she couldn't keep it. She had just gotten a new phone on her own birthday a few months ago. I was so upset that I was raving that I never wanted to celebrate my birthday again, and my grandparents let me spend the night at their house. When I came home, I still didn't talk to my parents. My mother just kept crying because I wouldn't talk to her, and my father was as silent as me. The next weekend, my grandparents persuaded me to go with them out to dinner, and when we got there, I was shocked to see a whole new party for me. My parents were there, and they had the "don't hate us" smiles on their faces the whole time. There was a big chocolate cake with 18 candles on it, and there was even a banner with my name. They called it my happy belated birthday graduation party because I didn't really have either this year. I kind of had to act like I was happy. One good party doesn't erase 8 years of favoritism, or even make a difference in it, really. And what about my sister? She was sitting at the table with her arms crossed and her lips snarled because it was not all for her like it used to be. And instead of singing happy birthday for me, they just sang a different version called Happy Day. Then as soon as I blew out the candles, my sister shrieked. I mean a deafeningly loud little girl shriek. My parents had to hurry her out and then bring her back in later, looking more unhappy than ever. She silently sulked in her seat for the rest of the party. I did get a new smartphone too, and my sister got hers taken away, among other things for what she did at the previous party. But the smartphone was not all. The whole family had pitched in and gotten me a car. It was just an old white Volvo, but I loved it the moment I saw it. My grandfather knows a lot about cars and fixed it up himself. I was so happy, but my sister clearly was not, because she let out another one of those shrieks. She started having a huge tantrum and demanding a car too. My mother had to take her into the bathroom and they didn't come back out for a while. My father just went back to looking defeated. My sister had effectively spoiled their attempt at trying to look good in front of the whole family. Many family members also had harsh words for my parents that my sister was behaving that way because they raised her to be a princess spoiled brat. I obviously started driving the car around right away, but only days later my sister actually wrecked the car by taking a hammer and breaking 2 of the side windows and cracking the windshield to the point the car was not drivable. My parents stopped her before she did any more damage, but she screamed murder when they grabbed her and took the hammer away, then tried to bite them. Oh, everyone was angry with my sister, especially my grandparents, because my grandfather had put so much work into that car, and my sister ruined it while having a huge tantrum. My grandparents had spoiled my sister so much that she couldn't mentally understand that I could have something she couldn't. And several other family members told my parents off for how they were setting my sister up for failure by making her an entitled brat that expects the world to be given to her. And she's going to have a terrible adult life because they won't put their feet down and teach her some respect. Well, her actions didn't go unpunished. My sister was grounded for the rest of the summer, and starting from the new school year was sent to boarding school. My mother cried like a baby about it too, but my father had to be firm that it was the only way to start fixing the damage they'd done. Yes, they fully admit they are at fault. It was hard for them not to, since no one sided with them at all. My sister is absolutely unhappy at that school. She hates the clothes, she hates the rules, and she's been lying almost all the time. But with cameras almost everywhere now, she's not getting away with any of it. Our parents tried to visit her a few times, but she just screamed at them for putting her in that place. From what I hear, this may be her school life until she's 18 years old. My parents paid for the repairs of my car. They had an auto glass company fix the windows and windshield, and it looks as good as new. In August, my grandfather told me he had a job opportunity for me from a friend, but it was 40 miles away, so I'd have to move out of my parents' house unless I wanted that drive. I was eager to move. Finding a first apartment was not easy though. I had to get a credit card to get approved for a studio, but I did it. And I have been living where I am now since September. My parents keep reaching out to me, but I barely talk to them. Whenever we do talk, I just feel uneasy and tense. My grandfather has said that they just don't want to admit how badly they messed up as parents, and trying to get me to forgive them will make them feel better about themselves, or something like that. But I'm not going to forgive, not anytime soon. I'm finally happy and away from them. Now they have nothing. They don't have me, and they don't have my sister. And my parents had to work more hours because boarding school for my sister is not cheap. Nor can I imagine was the party they threw for me, or the damage to my car. Empty house, furious relatives, and the only thing they have left is their work. Feels like terrible misery to me, and I don't enjoy it. But it is the consequence of their own actions after all. This story was a heartbreaking and realistic portrayal of how parental favoritism can ruin a child's life. This boy was neglected and ignored by his parents, who showered all their love and attention on his sister. He suffered for 8 years until he finally snapped on his 18th birthday and exposed his parents' cruelty to the whole family. He moved out and cut off contact with his parents, who lost both their children and their respect. His sister, who was spoiled and entitled, also faced the consequences of her actions and was sent to boarding school, where she was miserable and lonely. The story showed how the parents' actions had lasting effects on both their children and how they could not undo the damage they had done. The story was engaging, and emotional. I felt sympathy for this boy, anger at the parents, and frustration at the sister. The story made me think about the importance of treating children fairly and lovingly and the consequences of failing to do so. I enjoyed reading this story, and I hope this boy finds happiness and peace in his new life. Like, comment, and subscribe to our YouTube channel, Story Podcast Book, and hit the bell button for the story notification.